Good evening and welcome to the Town of Sandwich Finance Committee meeting for February 3rd, 2026. Tonight's meeting is being aired on Sandwich Community Television and will be available for replay. I'm calling our meeting to order. Let's begin by rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. I would ask all of us on the Finance Committee and the staff to remember to turn on our microphones and to speak clearly so that those at home and those with us in the auditorium can hear us as well. First item on our agenda is the public forum. As the Finance Committee started last year moving into the budget season, we will continue to provide residents with ample opportunity to share thoughts and input with the Finance Committee on the fiscal 2027 budget, particularly on the topics that will be considered at each of our meetings coming forward. The public forum can help shape our discussion and prompt questions from those on the town staff that will be presenting to us. As such, does anyone with us tonight want to come forward to speak at this time? Seeing none, and if here in the auditorium, but if you're at home listening in, please know that you're welcome to attend our meeting of the Finance Committee here in person. We'd love to hear from you. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the October 28th, 2025 meeting minutes, which were sent out in the agenda packet. Are there any corrections, edits, or comments on those? Seeing none, do I have a motion to accept them?
Motion?
Motion by Crystal, second by Nancy. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you all. Correspondence, statements, and announcements. Just as a reminder to our Finance Committee members and for the public to be aware of, we currently have 6 planned additional meetings focused on various aspects of the fiscal 2027 budget during February and March. The schedule is posted on with the agenda packet that's posted online and was sent to all of our members. This subject it's subject to change and input from members as we move forward, and Bill and I will keep everybody informed of any changes that may come up. Does anyone else have any other correspondence or statements or announcements? Okay, seeing none. Let's move on to the town report and budget. So, Bud, why don't you lead us off with any updates perhaps on current fiscal year matters, progress, outlook?
Yeah, everything.
And then we move to, that's okay, and then we can move to the 2027 budget.
Yeah, so we're a little bit halfway through the fiscal year 26. Things are going really well. Couple of small departments where some minor money changes mean a big thing because there's not a lot of money in them. So Bill's already identified a couple small budgets that might need some help at the end of the year, but nothing big. Fire overtime, which has traditionally been an issue, looks good. I think we're all concerned about snow and ice. It just seems like most of the storms have come on a weekend and, you know, have had quite a lengthy duration. And certainly the one from a week and a half ago was significant, and it's not melting, as we all know. So, you know, we'll keep an eye on that and make recommendations as we get a little bit further on in the fiscal year. But all in all, things are really good. Let me just jump right into the budget presentation.
Please do, yeah.
I was mentioning to Ed, I woke up this morning, could hardly talk, and I seem to be okay right now. So Bill and Heather are on deck to immediately jump in if needed. But hopefully we'll get through this and then answer any questions, and then we'll all be a lot better next week. Couple quick things. Just want to start out with the budget overview and really what are some key takeaways of the whole presentation. And I guess if I had to pick the 3 biggest things, it would be that the general government budget increase is recommended at 2.92%. I know the school has recommended something underneath 3% as well. I can't remember when the last time both operating budgets from sort of both sides of the budget we're under that 3%. And we'll talk a little bit later about what we're hearing in other communities. But it's a purely a level service budget, well within our funding capacity. It addresses some cost centers that have been increasing and some known expenses that are different coming up, but nothing extreme. It does relocate a few staff to more appropriate budgets. The net impact on those movements is zero. The capital budget as it exists right now, and I stress it's just gone through the internal review with Heather and Bill leading the charge on that, is a net amount just over $1.4 million. And the overall budget, when you add in the offset transfers from enterprise funds, is just right at $2.25 million. There were a couple of items. We were going off last year's bid prices, so when we get this year's bid prices, we want to update those in case they've changed a little bit. But we'll be looking at that over the next few weeks, and then ultimately it goes to the Capital Improvement Planning Committee for their review and recommendation before it comes back to the Select Board and Finance Committee. And I guess one common theme that we usually talk about, but I think this year it's even a little bit bigger, is that we're waiting on some information on some key line items, specifically health insurance and our state receipts and assessments. So as we go through the presentation, there's a couple sentences that are highlighted in red that I'll stress those are either based on a year ago's numbers, not this year's numbers, or we're waiting, for example, on the health insurance numbers to come out. But I'll give you more details on that when we get to that point. And then also on the one-page budget summary that'll be in every Select Board and Finance Committee packet for the next several months. There's still some things that we have highlighted in yellow because it was, as we always talk about, which isn't unique, you know, the state budget is finalized in July or August, and we vote in May and take our votes in April. So that's just the way things work. So just a quick step back, an overview of where our money comes from and goes. I think it's fair to say if you looked over the last 10 years, like these might have changed, you know, 1% or 2 or 1 cent or 2, but it's generally very consistent. So about 80% of our money comes from taxes, 11% from state aid, almost exclusively the Chapter 90 funds. Our local receipts, which is money we bring in, the biggest chunk of that is motor vehicle excise payments. And then surplus revenue or free cash is about 4 cents on the dollar. And then when you look at where does our money go, and this is from a town-wide perspective, budget-wide perspective, the school operating budgets are about 42%, general government is about 23%, but it's important to point out the employee-related costs and overhead is about 21%. So I'll get to a slide that then apportions that out based on all the departments. Our state and county assessments, which we're familiar with, our debt, reserve funds, and capital purchases are relatively small. So if you look at all of those expenses in totality and apportion those employee-related costs out, you'll see the education-related costs make up about 62 cents on the dollar, general government costs 32 cents, some general costs that couldn't be classified either way at about 2 cents, and then debt costs are 4. The details that make up these charts are in the back of the budget binder, so you can see what the actual numbers are. And then purely if you look up only at the town's operating budget, meaning the school, Upper Cape Tech, and us, exclusive of all those other things, the school makes up about 60%, Upper Cape 4. You see the breakout with police and fire between 7 and 9, DPW at 5.5, library at 1.5, but all the other town accounts, whether they be departments or budget accounts like legal and professional services, there's over 25 of them, make up 12% of the overall budget. So I think I often like to try to point that out to the Select Board and Finance Committee because in my opinion, if that 12% don't do their jobs, the other more public departments don't open their doors. And so we're all related and we're all dependent on one another. So just to show that. So just to explain what's in the budget binders, all of you are familiar with what's in there, so I won't spend too much time. But we have the FY27 budget presentation in the first tab. The second tab is the overall budget summary, where Bill takes that one-page summary and then has linked on any of the accounts and line items. If you click on it, it shows you the backup of how we came up with the numbers that we're using right now. Tab 3 is our financial database, and as I know, I usually say if anyone wanted to learn the most about the Sandwich's overall budget over time, I would recommend that really they focus on tab 3. There's multi-year history there shown, and we have 5-year averages on all the numbers. The actual data that we have now goes back more than 30 years. So Bill and Caroline Caravana, our town accountant, went through each of the items on the database, and if they thought it would help people's understanding of the issue, we freed up more of the rows so people could see further back. If it really didn't make a big difference, we kept it at the 5. But as you page through tab 3, you'll see some of the topics have more information than others. Our capital budget is on tab 4. Again, that's still in the review process. The general government budget, which has a lot of detail, every individual person who works year-round, their salary to the dollar, what's been spent in operating budgets, what accounts in operating budgets have moved by even $10. There's a separate sheet that shows all that. And we have kept up the same budget format that we've used in the past 4 years, where we'll have like a one-page summary of each department with a few graphs. And then later on, you'll see the operating budget breakout and the personnel breakout. Safe space in the budget for the school budget, that should be here soon. I know they've already done all their presentations, and I'm sure you guys have seen some of the budget presentation material and their agendas that have gone out. Upper Cape Tech, they're coming before the committee in March. Superintendent Roger Forget let us know that when he's before us is right about the time they'll be voting the final budget. So he doesn't know if it'll be before or after, but he should have a really good handle on what that final number would be. And then we put a few different things in tab 8 that I thought you'd be interested in. There's a thumb drive at the beginning with all of the binder information on a stick drive if you wanted to use it that way. And those embedded links that Bill's established on the backup information are all included with that. And I guess I want to stress, last Thursday when I said to the select board it hadn't been activated yet, but as of Monday, yesterday, on sandwichmass.org, right on the home page, there's a link that the public could get to, and they can literally see every page that you and the select board have, and the binders are all on the public website right now. One of the things we added to the financial database in tab 3 is some new additional graphic information. Didn't want to go through all of it. There's probably about 15 additional pages, and so we just attached that in the back of tab 3. And Heather Harper, the assistant town manager, and Melissa Carroll in our office spent a lot of time with others as well to put those together. But I just wanted to show you just a couple of examples. There's all sorts of different demographic stuff you can look at, but we have some new graphic information for the public and the committees to look at. Tab 4, a quick summary of the capital budget, recognizing that the CIPC has yet to start the review process. Again, the net amount is just over 1.4 million with a 2.25 million capital. If you break out the focus areas from high to low, most funds are being spent on school building repairs and improvement, about $485,000. There's some fire ambulance that's being replaced, and that's being offset by the ambulance fund for $450,000. There's several department vehicles in many departments, just under $400,000. The DPW aerial lift and bucket truck, when we got the last state bids were at $300,000. New ones have come out, so Paul Tilton's getting that information, and Bill and Heather will be taking a look at that. It wouldn't surprise us if that goes up a hair. Marina dock repairs, again, coming from the Marina Enterprise Fund, just over $242,000. Some town building repairs and improvements at $213,000, and then golf equipment and improvements coming from the golf budget at $150,000. So it's good in the sense we're still doing a lot of capital, and we're offsetting quite a bit of it by money that the enterprise funds have earned, and they've proven that they can make those payments. A quick overview on the general government operating budget. I touched on it briefly, tab 5. It includes all the budget totals by department. We distributed draft budgets already filled out to department heads before Thanksgiving, got most of those back before Christmas. So we've just been fine-tuning things, I would say, for the last month. One of the things that we did is there were some higher level oversight positions that we felt should be moved to more appropriate departmental budgets. So those have taken place. It makes some of the changes when you look at year to year, department by department. Some of them are up a lot because where we move people, some of them are down a lot because where we move them from. But again, the net impact on all of that is zero. If you needed to go over that, like in a future meeting, we can go through that. But as I said earlier, the 27 budget reflects a 2.92% increase over 26. Any personnel changes between now and when we ask the boards for final votes on the budget for town meeting, most of the time that number goes lower. So if there are changes, we will bring that back to you. It wouldn't surprise us if it's, a couple hundredths of a percent lower. It's not going to be drastically lower, but it wouldn't surprise us if it goes a little bit lower. But again, it's a very straightforward level service budget. And one of the things that I know we've taken advantage of by trying to run things as lean as we can, like anytime a position becomes open, we look at the job description, we see, is there a better way to do it? Are there duties we should add? Is it in the right department? Like, how could we slightly improve the reorganization efforts? So we try to do that every year, and I'll touch on it later, but we really feel with those FY25 and beyond improvements that we made over the last 2 years, it really has positioned us well, which is one of the reasons, like we said, if we got those things, we would have pretty basic level service budgets, and that's what you're seeing. And that's what we plan to bring a year from now as well. So just to touch on some of the significant changes in the general government operating budget. So as always, we properly fund some realistic expenses, including some cost centers that have increased. The cost for our audit is up a little bit. As I said previously, we moved some of those high-level positions into one budget. We addressed some anticipated upcoming retirements, and I think, I can't remember if it's later in February or March, but Marie Buckner, the Human Resources Director, is going to be one of your guests to try to explain what we've been doing to try to recruit and retain people, what we've been doing to try to plan for positions that may open up down the road, how we're trying to train people internally to at least have qualified people that can apply and be considered for those positions. It maintains the FY25 and beyond initiatives that were voted and supported the last 2 years, and we really thank the committee and the public for that. They've proven to be really successful, and I go into a little bit more detail later on, so I'll touch on some of those. It also incorporates some reorganization efficiencies. I know we shared with you, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, that in looking at our internal processes, the biggest shortcoming we had is payroll, in the sense we do in-house payroll ourselves. It's sort of the tail that wags the dog. There's required checks and balances between the treasurer's office, who issues the payroll, and the accounting office, who double checks it, but then you roll in the school department as well. It's a lot of pressure on a few number of people if something goes wrong. And so we've been working for quite a while now to try to say, how can we make that better? Heather applied for and received a grant from the state to take a look at our payroll process, and it was quickly apparent we didn't really need advice on the payroll service. We needed to try to get money to go to a private payroll service. So Bill's has been overseeing that effort with the school department. And I believe in Dr. Maruschek's budget, there's an additional staff person in their business manager's office that's going to help with grant oversight and with payroll, which is huge. And so we're going to be able to purchase that system and pay the monthly bill throughout FY27. The reason I'm spending a little bit of time on this is that will be a new expense for FY28 that we'll have to add to the IT budget just to pay for those costs. They're not crazy. but we're actually looking forward to that implementation, which could be late this spring or at least by July 1st. Another good example is we've had 3 part-time positions within our budget, 2 of which were vacant, and then the third became vacant, and we talked about what's a better way to skin the cat. And so we've recently hired a communications coordinator, and we think we're going to get a lot better service by taking those 3 positions, moving them into 1. And you may recall that we had some other funding for a private public relations firm that has really helped us out a lot. How that looks a year from now, I think, is to be determined. Like, it wouldn't surprise us if we scale that back a little bit with this new position. But there's no new positions. It's very straightforward level service budget. We're always looking at ways to offset some of our costs. So we did formally execute within Good Health a donation agreement to support the 2 school resource officer positions. And the goal was to get the money for the following fiscal year by the end of the prior calendar year. So that way we knew we had the money in the bank for the whole upcoming year. And we did. In Good Health, David Noble, the president, gave us the check for $200,000 just at the end of last calendar year. So it's in the bank. So we already have the check received for FY27 services. And there's an agreement between himself and the select board that will continue. We also were able, because of strong receipts in our ambulance fund, to transfer a little bit more for fire department expenses. I say a little bit more because we're already transferring, I think, $2.1 million, and so this adds another $125,000. I should say, in the general government budget, there is another sheet that shows you all the interfund transfers that we do on one page, so you can see those. I thought I'd just touch briefly on our enterprise funds. Public probably isn't aware of all this, but certainly the Finance Committee and Select Board are. We have 4 enterprise funds. It's fair to say there's no significant changes other than normal improvements in our cable licensing fees. That revenue is based on cable subscribers and costs. It's been very, very consistent through the years with slight increases. Someone asked us recently, what are the Verizon and Fios trucks going around? It's important to note that they're not offering cable services. If they were, they would have to negotiate a license with the town. I think they're just offering internet services right now. Transfer station, no significant changes. CMAS, which is in Rochester, Massachusetts, which is the waste to energy plant, has been renamed ReWorld CMAS. There was a 5-year extension that, if both sides were comfortable with, it laid out terms for disposal costs in the town's favor. So obviously we wanted the 5-year extension. They decided they wanted to renegotiate that. So because of that, the select board did readjust the sticker fee accordingly to make up those differences. That 5-year extension is still being worked on. If you compare what's been proposed compared to towns that already took the 5-year, ours will be even less than theirs because we were one of the first towns to go with CMAS, and they've sort of recognized that and they appreciate it. So I just want to stress that we're not paying more than other communities. If anything, we're paying a little bit less. Sandwich Hollows, it's our 4th year of paying for the debt for the irrigation and some of the maintenance equipment. We've had some excellent financial performance there really since COVID. Every year the revenues have gone up, and that's helped us address some internal needs. A great example of that is the $100,000+ in smaller equipment that we'll be able, because the budget's been healthy, we'll be able to buy new equipment for some of our smaller things outright using their money. And then Marina's sort of the best gig in town financially because it's a captured audience with really long wait lists. I know most people are familiar with it who are on the committee, that it's actually owned by the Army Corps of Engineers, and we operate it in a long-term lease with them. It's very strict on where the money goes, how it has to be spent. We are able to back charge them their employee costs and health insurance costs and general insurance, but that's about it. We take a little bit for doing their bills and payroll. But in a nutshell, almost everything we raise has to stay at the marina, which is why we've been able to keep it up pretty well. There's always dock replacement projects There's a cool state grant we got from the Seaport Advisory Council to possibly build like a harbor walk inside the riprap above the docks on one side. And it's just in design phase, but it looks like that would be funded by the state if it moves forward. So we plan to ask for the second round of funding for that. But they're all in really good shape. I would say, if anything, Bill has included right after the general government portion in tab 5, there's about 15 pages on each of the 4 enterprise funds that go into a lot of detail where the money comes from, where it gets spent. Really importantly, what have our balances been through the years? You know, we don't want to make a lot of money, but we also want to make sure there's enough in sort of holdings to help us if something goes wrong. I would say of those 4, the one that's probably lately we've been worried about a little is the transfer station, just because the cost for that equipment is so expensive, but it's still in okay shape. I wanted to touch briefly on the FY25 and beyond modernization and efficiency plan. So mostly we wanted to say thank you that it's really worked. And as the committee's aware, the goal was to organize and modernize Sandwich for long-term success and flexibility. So proper organizational structure of all the things we funded, I think the 2 most important ones have been the Director of Community Development and the Director of Operations for Community Services, slightly elevated department head positions that oversee 4 departments. And I think we've gotten more out of those 2 positions than everything else we've done. You know, more than the 3 police officers we hired on 4 to midnight, more than the money in DPW, which was huge, more than the fire overtime. Like, operationally, those 2 positions have been great. Operational flexibility, if you remember, we added a little bit to the personnel expense account. So as things happen, we have funds to turn to. If you look at how much money I return from that account, we don't spend it unless we need it. You know, we return probably as much as we spend every year. We've addressed some long-term underfunded accounts, especially the fire overtime, and last year was huge. We were able to add over $600,000 to the DPW public infrastructure, and I know when Paul Tilton and Chief Burke come in, they're going to highlight, you know, what they've been able to do with those funds. And then recruitment and retention, it's just something that I guess we've seen, especially for department head positions. It's getting harder to recruit people, and so it's not like when we hire someone they're making a lot less than someone was who maybe had been in that position for a while. It's sort of leveled out, and in some cases we've had to go out a couple times, but all in all we've been doing okay with that. The plan supported the town's mission statement, vision statement, and guiding principles. All of those are spelled out in the select board's long range plan, and the long range plan I think is the first attachment in tab 8. And then the full FY25 and beyond report that we asked for is in there. Plus, there's a 2-page summary of what we've actually implemented. So that's all in tab 8. So we have no additional requests, nothing new for 27. Later years to be determined as needed. The 2 remaining positions or areas that we identified was a part-time administrative clerk and fire. So far, Chief Burke feels we haven't had that need, but we just didn't want to forget it. But then, as the committee knows, wastewater is a really big effort over decades. At some point, when we actually get in closer to implementation, we will need to have a director and some type of office assistant when bills go out and all the rest. Once we either upfront the money for that the first year, it should be able to pay by user fees. But we just want to highlight that and not forget that that's coming down the road. In addition, you know, we're always trying to think of budget savings. So there's a couple of known ones. I know the first one, police and fire chiefs are going to highlight when they come before you with DPW in a few weeks. And that's the Regional Emergency Communications Center, or REC, with Barnstable and Yarmouth. There's been an intermunicipal agreement that's been signed off by the 2 select boards and the Barnstable Town Council. That was about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. So far, we've gotten 3 state grants totaling $1.5 million. The third grant is concluding, or like literally in the next month or so, with 60% construction design drawings and the hiring of a rec executive director. Barnstable's already gone out and advertised for that. Marie Buckner and Chief Burke have gone through the resumes. Chief Burke will be sitting in on the interviews. So it's been a very inclusive process. The next grant we get would be the 4th grant, and that will take it to final construction design and bid documents. Then once the bids are known, the 5th grant would seek full construction funding. So on all of this, there's no local cost to it. To their credit, Barnstable has played the lead. It's fair to say, like, they can do things that the other 2 towns can't do, but they haven't asked us for a penny, and they've had an in-house town architect that's been overseeing all this work and working with the right consultants. And police chief in Barnstable, Chief Shallis, Sandwich resident, she has been active as well, helping oversee the grants. So the goal is some point in 2028 to have the building built, the people hired and trained to start. I should also add that not only do they provide full construction funding, they also provide all furnishings and IT equipment, and they pay for the local costs, 75% the first year, 50% the second, 25% the third, and then no subsidy. But even with all that, the projected net savings by the time we actually fully implement it is $700,000 a year. That's based on a study that was done 3 years ago. If anything, those costs and the savings probably has gone up. But the goal is to implement the rec at some point in 2028. So if you think about, like, if it's the last half of 28, that's fiscal year 2029, we won't have a full year savings. We really think FY30 will be when you see the full savings of that work. Ironically, in the same year is our final Sandwich Hollows acquisition payment, which was approved within our 2.5 levy limit. So that will be a known savings of $400,000 within our levy. So there's over $1 million that by FY30 we should realize, that either if we don't need it, it doesn't get used, or if it gets used to hold down other increases, that's something that's coming our way that we know those 2 we can hang our hat on. I wanted to talk about long-term prioritized capital needs. I know this is something that the committee and the select board have talked about a lot. Just to refresh your memory on what the primary 4 needs are. One is the DPW facility and capital substation for the downtown area. It really is the last new municipal building that we need for decades. Significant improvements in public service. Based on the input that we've received so far, the consultants and the department heads and our project team, which includes Matt and Crystal, have been working on value engineering and scope reduction. That's been taking place over the last several months. We have a meeting Thursday, and so I think our goal is to make a presentation back with the select board probably in March. I think that's realistic. And so if that happens, I'll be sure to let you guys know when that's taking place. And just to refresh everyone's memory, the funding we've received so far is up through a conceptual design and some of the focus follow-up that we've been doing. And really the only way to fund something that large is through a debt exclusion. There's the large-scale capital needs, primarily in the school department, and I know we're aware that the architectural consultant is reviewing and preparing a report on those buildings. It's clear that the current school debt exclusion for $13.5 million, and then there were some other ARPA funds that were added to that, is not sufficient for the tasks we wanted to get done, although most of them have been completed, and that there's additional costs that'll be needed after that. On the town side, I know we shared with you, we're preparing an in-house maintenance plan because people are doing that as part of their normal work. It's probably not going quite as fast as the school outside consultant, but it's fair to say everything that Heather has helped spearhead on that, it's all what we thought. What do you do to maintain a building over 20 years, not to completely redo it? So I think the cost differences will be, quite significant when we get those reports back. One of the things that I remember when Bob was chair of the finance committee that we talked about a lot was, like, could the CPA monies help us with any applicable capital needs? And so some great examples of that is the town hall restoration here that's ongoing. But also what's recommended for May are some resurfacing efforts at both rec facilities and the high school facilities, specifically the tennis courts at the high school. If you've ever been at Oak Crest Cove, sort of down near the water, there's that multi-purpose court. I think it's 1 or 2 basketball courts and I think 2 tennis courts. And then the big one, and again, Dave Mason, who's our wastewater coordinator, is going to come, I think in March as well, March 3rd. And he and I have already been communicating about all the updates. So I thought I'd just go through these quickly because you're going to get a lot more detail in less than a month. But just to remind everyone, the voters rejected that surcharge increase from 2% to 3%. But as we've said, the 2% will still enable us to fund the engineering analysis, design and permitting. A lot of that has already been proposed, and I'm currently reviewing a scope of work to do 3 huge things totaling about $900,000, so that's all part of that effort. We will need to ask for increased debt exclusions for implementations because we didn't get the extra 1%. We've really worked hard continually on the Joint Base Cape Cod efforts. We're waiting for some feedback from the state and federal regulatory agencies, and the most recent update that we had that was about a month ago was very positive in the sense that it seems like they want to help find a way, if we did the collection and conveyance system in town, went out to the base until we cross the base boundary, even if it connects to a privately operated system on the base, anything inside the town boundary should be SRF eligible, state revolving fund, which is huge because that gets us first low interest loans, which helps a little, but then it gets us 25% principal relief from the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund. That's huge. So things are looking more positive there. I recently got an email from the Deputy Commissioner of DEP confirming our notes from the meeting. They were going to take a closer look at them, but that they felt there was no legislative change that would be needed to support our effort, but that DEP would have to seek supporting letters from, I forget how they phrased it, but sort of some of the estuaries and Mass Bays program or Buzzards Bay Coalition, like get supporting documents to say if we improve our wastewater system, it helps them. Probably the biggest thing, 2 biggest things that we've been doing are the school system upgrades. Those are all ongoing. It's likely, the goal is to have all 3 schools switched over or upgraded before school starts again in September. Oak Ridge and Forestdale contracts have been awarded, very basic type work. Ground's too hard right now, but that'll go quick once they do that. High school, as we've shared with you, contracts were approved, I think, late last summer. It's proprietary equipment. It's on back order. It's all in the works, but as soon as that comes in, you'll see some big changes there. So those are great. And then we've always tried to anticipate if all this moved as fast as it realistically could, when would the tax impacts start impacting the public? We still think that's a good decade away. So I know it's something we need to talk about. It's something we need to make progress on, but it's not something that's going to impact people imminently. So Dave's going to give you an update on all those things and probably go into a little bit more detail what we're trying to do with our neighbors, Mashpee, Barnstable, and Falmouth, where we contribute to their abatements. So now I just want to touch on some overall progress that we've made and some issues of concern. Several of these are similar to what we've looked at in previous years, so maybe I won't dwell on them too much, but I think when you look at how some of the recent numbers have changed, it really makes you scratch your head. So really, I would say 3 things that impact us related to the schools, but I stress it's not criticizing the schools, it's just a fact of life, have to do with tuition assessments, enrollments, and per pupil costs. So I think the committee's aware that tuition assessments are the one line on our expense side of the budget that's increased the most over the last 20 years. And that's for local students who choose to go to public school options other than Sandwich. So that would be other public schools like Mashpee or Barnstable, and other technical schools, but not Upper Cape because that's different, or students who go to charter schools. So in FY26, the year we're in now, our total assessments were $4.8 million. That was a 10% increase over 25, even though based on the school's numbers, we had 33 less students choosing those type of options. So I think that concerns us, because if we've dropped by 33 kids, which is about 10%, but then we have a 10% increase in our expenses, why? And so part of that, which we're going to touch on in a minute, is because as our enrollments go down and the budgets go up a little bit, the cost per pupil rises. And so when a lot of these assessment formulas are calculated, one of the things they look at is what are you paying per student at your home district? The early state estimate that we got from the governor's office a week and a half ago projects at least another 7% increase for over FY26 for FY27. It's important to note that the charter schools don't have to identify to Department of Elementary and Secondary Education their anticipated enrollments for the following year until March 1st. So it's usually the House numbers that are more accurate than the governor's, but it's a little bit concerning that the governor's numbers already have us going up 7%. Since the inception of tuition assessments, because I'll explain in a second, it used to come from the school budget 20 years ago, it's averaged annually over a 75% increase. So yeah, the percentage increases are a lot less than they were initially, but we're probably looking at over $5 million in costs for next fiscal year, which is $1.6 million above our FY26 Upper Cape assessment. And as Bill likes to say, it's almost like 6% of our total levy gets taken away right at the beginning, goes to the state to pay for these costs, and then it gets distributed. But we don't control those funds. This is a graph in tan. You will see what those assessments have been. If you look on the far left, there's hash mark tan boxes for FY04 and FY05. Back then, state said the school department budget had to pay for those assessments. They changed the regulations that it would then come right off the cherry sheet assessments from the town. So you can see how much those tan lines have grown over time. That sounded funny. And then the discretionary aid, which is all the other aid that we get other than Chapter 70 aid, ever since FY13 has been less than what just those assessments were. So in effect, we became a debtor town in terms of cash flow to the state and others in FY13, and it's just gotten worse almost every year. Again, this does not show Chapter 70 aid, which is huge because that's like $8 million that the school gets to help with their operating budget. Another thing that's really impacted us is enrollments. So there's been a 56% local enrollment decrease since the peak in FY02. I want to stress local enrollment because until about I'll give you the exact date in a minute, but until about 12 years ago, we didn't allow kids from other towns to come into Sandwich. Then we did. So to compare the enrollments back then, we have to subtract off the kids coming in from out of district. And back then it was only K through 12. There was no pre-K program. So we try to balance that so you're looking at apples to apples. One of the things that jumped out us the most this year, and I'm sure Dr. Maruschek will touch on it, if you look at just grades 9 to 12, including kids that come in from other towns, we have 499 students. It wasn't that long ago that there were 250 students per grade. It's been a huge change in the past 10 or 15 years. So school choice in for kids to come to Sandwich didn't exist until the 2009-10 school year. And for the current year, there's 153 kids coming from other locations. One of the things that I always scratch my head about, and it's a pure double standard. So when a student chooses, those 153 kids come to Sandwich, money flows in from those towns directly to the school operating budget. In the governor's early estimate, that is supposed to go up over $1.5 million total, an increase of almost $400,000 from what it is today. Meanwhile, when our kids go to other districts, we have to pay for it right off the top of the town budget. And so what the governor's projected is another $325,000 increase in our assessment. So there's a huge sway between money that comes in directly to the school without going through our coffers and then what we have to pay to those other districts. This one bullet point is in red because we don't have the October 1st, 2025 numbers yet. But a year ago, 35% of K through 12 students sought non-Sandwich educational opportunities. So that obviously impacts our charter and tuition assessments. And as you'd expect, as our enrollments decrease, but the budget goes up a little bit each year, our net school spending increases, and that's all detailed in the financial database. So here's just a quick look at school enrollments from our peak in 2002 till today. And again, this only shows Sandwich students, so that was not counting any kids who choose to come to Sandwich from other districts, and that started in the 2009-12 school year, and it focuses on kindergarten because we didn't have pre-K over a decade ago. So the last thing I just want to touch on quickly is our per pupil expenditure. So it's just simple math. Like the base assessment for a lot of these calculations on what we get charged starts with our per pupil expenditures. So as that spending increases, tuition assessments increase as well, despite fewer kids going to charter schools. So if you look at per pupil expenses from 2008 to 2024, it's been a significant increase. So in 2024, which is the most recent data the state has available, it's about $26,500. We're not questioning that that's not necessary or it's not the right thing to do. Just saying, like, when we get those charges when kids go elsewhere, it's based on what we're spending locally. So a couple of capital and maintenance issues, and I think sometimes, rightfully so, we worry about the costs ahead and we forget the accomplishments that have been made. And if you really look at the last results of the last decade, thanks largely to the support of the Select Board, the Finance Committee, the public, we've public safety building debt exclusion, the public roads and infrastructure debt exclusion, library renovations, and the Center for Active Living construction. Those were done within 2.5. The 100 Route 6A purchase and improvements, all done with cash without debt. The school building improvement debt exclusion for the $13.5 million. Completion of the boardwalk, the Section 111 project. We increased significant operating budget in the facilities department, a big increase in the DPW operating budget for those infrastructure funds, and we were able, with some of the WIF funding, to do that land purchase through the bankruptcy court that will provide us a long-term wastewater option if and when we need it. That's a lot to get done in 10 years. So I think that's something we should all be proud of, that we were able to accomplish and see some real results. We know there's a few more things to come that we talked about a few slides ago. And the other thing, if you look, and there's a page in your database that shows all this, what we're spending annually for a capital focus, especially when you factor in the transfers coming in from other sources, we're spending substantially more for capital than we did 12 years ago or so. It's great. We thought it was important this year especially to talk about a few employee-related costs, mostly related to health insurance. So one of the best things I believe we did was to switch to the Mass Interlocal Insurance Association, or MIA, about 6 years ago or so. Our cost control on health insurance has been better than what the average has been, and certainly better than most of the other Cape towns. But I think the reality is, nationally, I think you'd be hard-pressed to identify another big picture topic that impacts everybody, public sector, private sector, southwestern part of the country, the northeastern part of the country. Everyone's feeling it. And one of the biggest things that towns have been getting hit with is utilization of GLP-1 drugs for weight loss. The way it's been described from some really knowledgeable consultants and people that we interact with is, never has there been a series of drugs that are so popular that have been so expensive. Typically, when a drug is really popular, the price comes down. This hasn't. And there's been talk about it, but it hasn't happened yet. So nationally, they feel that it's impacting rates year to year by 2 to 4%. What I thought was most impressive in a daunting way is those medications represent more than 8% of the total healthcare cost nationally. Like, that's amazing. And so, at least in Massachusetts, Blue Cross Blue Shield has said that they're no longer covering those medications for weight loss. They'll cover them for diabetes and a couple of other reasons, but not for weight loss. So with the state legal requirements that cities and towns have that are fairly limiting, Maya voted earlier in January to match that Blue Cross Blue Shield decision for 27. So we won't be offering GLP-1 weight loss coverage for those medications. Wouldn't surprise me from what we've heard from Blue Cross Blue Shield if the price of those come down significantly and they stay there consistently. There's always drugs that are going on and off coverage. So who knows what will happen down the road, but we're trying to minimize our impacts. So just to give you a feel, the average increase for all of Maya's members is going to be about 8.5%. If they voted not to get rid of the GLP-1s, they were looking at average 15% increase. So you get the benefit of being part of a bigger group, but they also rate you based on actual experience. So even with the 8.5%, we will find out in the next probably week and a half, are we going to be anywhere between 3% and 14%? Just so you guys know, the number that you see on the one-page budget summary, we were told by our Maya representative, because this was well before the vote was taken to not offer those medications, not cover those medications, we budgeted 15%. So hypothetically, we hear your rates are going up 10%. That will save a lot of money in our health insurance line item, and we know where we would recommend moving those funds, which we will share with you as soon as we get that number. They typically let us know by mid-February. If it is like February 15th, the next week is school vacation week, so your meeting after that, we should be able to give you a better indication on those. Property and liability insurance, that includes things like workers' comp, all of our buildings, school public officials liability, all sorts of things, auto coverage. Those have been really stable and very reasonable. Very modest increases or decreases the last several years. We were told we could level fund our expenses for this upcoming year, which is great. So if you look at what's in your budget, it's 0% compared to 26. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about, what happens if those health insurance, for lack of a better word, blips the last 2 years continue and become a trend. Like, I think that's probably what worries Bill, Heather, Caroline, and I the most. If you just look at what we budgeted so far, and that's why I kept it in red, because we're hopeful that number will come down when we get our real rates. But, we budgeted over a $1.4 million increase in our health insurance costs, which makes up almost 70% of our 2.5% increase. That doesn't include new growth, but still, that's a huge chunk of what our 2.5% each year is. And if that continues, that trend continues for 5 years or 10 years, I don't think there's a city or town in the state that is going to be able to keep that up. Like, you'd have to do an override or cut services. So I guess that's one of the bullet points that we have at the bottom of this slide is, what if those trends continue? So it's common for almost everyone, not just the public sector or Sandwich. It's clear, in the long run, it's not sustainable without impacting that excess levy capacity, which thank goodness we have it, because other places don't. And it's impacting a lot of other towns worse than Sandwich. I can't tell you how many communities we've heard over the last 1 or 2 months that either have had failed overrides, they're going to have to ask again, they're cutting services, In many cases, it's to cover some of these overhead costs. I was at a Cape manager meeting in Barnstable in January, and about half the Cape towns were there. I would say on average, most towns were looking at a 5 to 6% increase on their general government budget. We're still able to come in under 3%, so we're good. We have reserves. We feel confident that we can go several more years without an override, but if these crazy health insurance numbers keep up and we don't find a way to address it, I think a lot of communities are going to be in difficult times. We were just at the Mass Municipal Association annual meeting a week and a half ago. Brookline failed an override for the first time in their history. Franklin has lost 2 overrides, like each more than $5 million. Like, there's some really large, well-respected, wealthy towns that are struggling. So I feel like we're good for 2 to 5 years, but depending on how things go. But if this problem isn't addressed, then I think it impacts every employer. Like that, it's going to be really telling what happens down the road. And then just one of the things that I know we've pointed out, I think our last 3 budget presentations, we do have debt funded inside Proposition 2.5 levy limit, which is rare. That Sandwich Hollows open space purchase, which goes back to 1999, the last payment on that is coming up, so we will free up $400,000 in FY30. But annually for our library renovations and Center for Active Living, we're spending about $870,000 a year on that within 2.5. So those are bills we have to pay. We're doing fine. We're making those payments easily now, but that's the type of thing that could impact services down the road if other problems arise like health insurance. So it's atypical to have that kind of debt. So my personal advice would be, like, our goal should be, when we go to fund debt in the future for big projects, it really shouldn't be done within 2.5. We should get a vote for debt exclusions and try to fund them that way. So we're getting close to the end, I promise. So now we're going to get to the point that you guys are used to looking at every week. But I think by now, we try to be really safe and fiscally conservative on our budget projections. The Department of Revenue mantra that we always hear: underestimate your receipts, overestimate your expenses. It's just, how we're supposed to do things. I think we all have a track record collectively from all of our efforts of being accurate and financially responsible. And I know I say it every year, but local government's the only level of government that has a requirement to balance its budget, which is good. And so there are a couple line items that we've already touched on that are outside of our control that we're waiting on more details. So one is state receipts and assessments. The governor just issued her cherry sheets in late January. So when we get to the next page, that's sort of informed by what she identified, but the final true numbers aren't known till July or August. Typically what happens, and Bill can correct me, like most of the time, Chapter 78 is either at what the governor says or a little bit above. Like, it usually grows, it goes to the House and the Senate a little bit. Our experience has been tuition assessments have usually gone up a little bit from what the governor said, and the discretionary aid, we don't count on it, so we just level fund it and hope it goes our way. So we'll show you that in a second. And as I said, like 3 times now, health insurance rates, we'll get our actual percentage increase, hopefully, by February 15th. And so when we have our meeting in late January, we'll have those numbers updated. So here's a quick look at our general fund revenues and expenses. I know it's in fine print, but just to touch on some of the highlights, we still have an excess levy reserve on the left-hand side. We've actually increased that from the last time we looked at the budget up to $3.2 million. I think we feel very strongly that if health insurance goes our way and money gets freed up, it'd be nice to increase that even further. And I want to stress that if there were other needs that we had to fund, we wouldn't be putting it there. But I think when you look at that trend on some of those, I don't mean to keep saying health insurance, but if some of those trends continue, you want to have not money stocked away, but the ability to raise money stocked away. Because again, people aren't being taxed for that. So that's a good chunk of money that people aren't being assessed. On the right-hand side, probably the big thing, or I should say on this Chapter 78, the governor's budget was up by about 2%. So we have that on both sides of the ledger. And speaking with Dr. Maruschek, he wants to use that increase to help fund some additional carpet replacement that he talked about last year. And I think when he was back in just before Christmas, he touched on that as well. If you look on the right-hand side of our expenses, right at the top is our tuition assessments. So we plugged in the governor's number, just under 7%. That could go up, but at least we've plugged in something. Again, the number that will probably change the most is group health insurance. If we do free up some funding, we would like to put a little bit more in stabilization of the OPEB trust fund, if it allows. And then, like I said, there's some fine tuning that's coming from a few departments on their capital budgets. When they initially submitted their requests in the fall, some of those numbers have changed. So we're going to update that accordingly once we get those final updates. But from what the school has recommended is a 2.7% increase in local funding. General government is at 2.92. And from what Roger Forget has let us know, they're coming in, he thinks around 4.41. Usually whatever he tells us, whatever they vote is typically a little less than that, but he's really good about sharing that. A lot of their budget numbers that they base their budget on are predicated by their enabling legislation on the governor's budget. So where that just came out, we should hear, I would think within a couple of weeks, is that still accurate or should we move it up or down? But we're in good shape. We really are. This is a good budget. It's a level service budget. I'm sure on both sides, it's not doing anything crazy. So broken record, still waiting on the estimated local aid and receipts that, we'll know better well after we vote at town meeting. Should know the health insurance costs in a week or two. The Upper Cape Tech number, we are up 5 students or 3.2%. But that will help dictate what our assessment is. But that's, we think what we have plugged in is based on that additional number. So here's the same exact spreadsheet that we looked at a slide ago with anything that's still up in the air highlighted in yellow. So just to give you a feel, you guys know by now that a lot of those state numbers, those are always going to stay yellow because we won't know the final till after town meeting. But it gives you a feel for sort of what we're looking for clarity on, and that will allow us to make some small movement of funds, but nothing great. But as always, we'll work on trying to give you the best recommendations we can. If they need to be revised and as they get updated, we'll amend those regularly. We have a few months to go before we have to finalize anything for town meeting. We usually try to vote by the end of March, early April. Those revenues and expenses will change regularly, but I don't think they're going to change drastically. And, we'll include that one-page summary in every meeting that we have between now and town meeting. Without a doubt, this is our 22nd fiscal year without an override. Despite significant increases in tuition assessments, employee-related costs, some operating centers, cost centers, capital needs. So over those same 22 years, there's been 106 requests on the Cape for overrides, 7 per town on average, and we've had no overrides. So we're really in a good financial position compared to others. Not that we don't have worries for the long haul like all of us do, but we really feel like we're in good shape comparatively. The committee presentation is tonight. There's really minimal operating budget changes to review, and I know we're having departments come in, especially the bigger ones, to explain maybe some of the bigger projects that we're working on. It's purely a level service operating budget. In many ways, you could vote it tonight if you wanted. I know you won't. So there's extensive staff input and support in preparing this. No one more than Bill, and Bill gets it out to the department heads and interacts with them constantly. Just so you guys are aware, most towns don't do it this way, and I'm not saying it's the best thing, but it's probably because we've been around a while. We give the departments their completed budget forms. If they want more, they have to go to a group meeting with the 4 of us and the HR director and a few other people to explain why they want more, what's it for. Obviously, if it's something straightforward like, our contract with the auditors is going to go up $10,000, we budget that. But if it's We make people work for it. There's not a new position in any of the general government departments. It's the 4th year with a new budget format, and so we always add something new each year. This year, like, there is that added visual summary under tab 3 with some of those improved graphics. If you guys think of anything you'd like changed next year, like over the next several months, if you notice things, write it down, and then we'll try to make those changes for the FY28 budget. I really feel that Sandwich is unique because of the culture of cooperation and teamwork that we have. A lot of work's been done by a lot of departments. Even trying to work on this presentation, we've probably had 8+ meetings with over a dozen people sitting around the table, like just second guessing each other and trying to fine tune stuff. We could find more to fine tune, but we think we got it where it needed to be. So the general government recommendation is 2.9%, 9.2% over last year. And before maybe we open up for questions, I didn't know if Bill or Heather or Caroline wanted to say anything.
Thank you, Bud. I think I would start off, and I don't know who's had a chance to meet Caroline Caravana, but she's our town accountant. She's really done a fantastic job this year in helping me with the budget. I can't speak highly enough of her and the work she's done in really allowing this budget to come forward. I think, as you know, we made the big initiative change 4 or 5 years ago now to make the change of the budget. There are countless hours and data points and all these things you could imagine to get into the budget to get to where we are tonight. I could not have done it without Caroline, so just very pleased to have her here tonight and thank her for her help. And the other thing I'd mention is I know Bud had showed the budget with the yellow. We do have some, I think last year, just to give you an update, I believe we got health insurance on Valentine's Day last year, so I think it was February 14th. So we're hopeful to get that, like Bud mentioned, like a week and a half. We will have in the packet every week that one-page summary that you guys are used to. And whether it's myself or Bud during his town manager report, when we have changes, we'll go ahead and we'll give you a summary of those changes that we're making to the budget. I think the one we're waiting on that's probably a little unusual at this point is a county retirement. They've just been a little delayed this year in getting it out. We're hopeful to have that very shortly. So hopefully we'll have that number soon, and then we'll also have the group health insurance one as well. So obviously what we're going to be voting on isn't what you're seeing tonight, but it'll be very close to what you're seeing tonight, hopefully. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Caroline. No, thank you, all of you. It's pretty obvious that it would take a team to put a binder like this together, but more importantly, to put the thought into it. So thank you all for all the effort. Questions, comments, thoughts relative to perhaps what was presented tonight, and maybe more importantly for where you'd like to see anyone who is coming before us in the weeks ahead, what you might want them to be prepared for to review with us. Go ahead, Nancy.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. In years past, we had talked about staffing, and it seems like you're saying the staffing is okay, and we were concentrating on the library and the Center for Active Living and hours that they were available to be open. How does that stand now?
Yeah, it's gone really well. The library operating hours have pretty much stayed the same. We've been able to trying to think of a good way to explain it. For example, there was a custodian position in the library that was in the library union, and when that person retired, we ended up with the union support having a new custodian that would report to facilities, so there would be better coverage if someone was out. We did add money for I think the phrase we used was night monitors at the Cal, so the hours have increased there, and we've been able to fill those pretty well. It's really a unique job, and we've gotten actually quite a few people to come forward in terms of sort of being like a night monitor for evening hours, because A lot of times people have some time at night where they could do it. We've struggled more, I would say, with custodial replacements for facilities. It's really hard to try to find someone who's able to work full-time. So we've pieced together some part-time people, but I think that's pretty common. I feel like I'm stealing a phrase that Chief Burke uses all the time, and I've heard Chief Keen use too. Like, they feel they're at their sweet spot. Like, they feel we have the right amount of EMS officers and police officers for a community our size based on our calls. And I know Chief Keen wants to talk to you about how helpful that was to get the additional officer on the 4 to midnight, so he'll touch on that. I believe we've added over the last 10 years 4 positions to DPW. I think that's the one department, if we had to have 1 or 2 more people, and where we see it mostly is, I would say, on storm events and things like that. They're really busy. We pretty much have an open ad constantly for DPW laborers, but also with like important certifications like Class A driver's licenses and hoisting licenses, so they can do more things. So just in talking to Human Resources, I think that's the one area that she says it's hardest to find qualified people to start.
Go ahead, Heather.
Just to build on that a little bit, I'd say that the area, and I think that's a really good question about the Center for Active Living, huge new programming, and they've done a remarkable job with a very limited additional investment. There are part-time positions at both the Cal and the Recreation Department. The revolving fund supported, and they're part-time. They both, I think, Rec more than Cal, have a hard time recruiting those part-time positions and having them stay. So there's a little bit of a revolving door there, so there's often some vacancies there. I know that's something that the 2 departments want to look at next year and sort of talk together and maybe brainstorm a way to be more effective with something, a little bit of a different model. No solutions, but that's sort of the challenge of the lower wage jobs that aren't full-time jobs. Whether it's a laborer's job that's on the lower end of the pay spectrum or a part-time job, it's really where we have the hardest time recruiting employees, and they tend to be the programs that the community wants the services the most.
I had some thoughts about when we talk about the money going out for students that choose to go elsewhere. Have we looked at what the cost would have been if every one of them was here, and what that difference is that we're paying?
I think what's hard is, like, years ago when it switched that the town had to pay, we never said anytime that goes up, we're taking that from the school budget. Like, we never did that. And so in the beginning, it was a couple $100,000 here, a couple $100,000 there. Well, now it's $5 million, so that it's sort of like, and how do I say it? School choice is really important throughout the state, particularly there's some cities that would come to all of our minds where they really need to have other opportunities. What's hard is, like, we know how good Sandwich Public Schools are and how highly they're considered, and yet people, I think that stat is probably going to be similar to a year ago. Roughly a third of our kids, K through 12, go to other options, and some of those are private schools that kids would go to anyway. Some might be a parochial school, whatever. It's, that's what choices are, but there are more choices today, so that's hard. And our enrollments, for example, at Sturgis, where most of the kids were going previously, they have come down, but it's still significant. It's still over 200 kids. And that's just high school age.
Just on the point of assessments, though, I'm thinking to your comments tonight and last week with the select board. If the schools had to pick that up, to be picking up at the same number that the town's picking up at, and the burden to taxpayers would likely still be the same.
Maybe. I don't know.
I mean,
I would say I don't think the
it's
school would
shifting it,
have.
does it?
I don't think the school would have school choice then. Like, I think those 153 kids, they would say, no, we're not taking kids from other towns.
That's an option.
I would think so. They could do that tomorrow, but I'm not saying they should.
Yeah.
They've always said they only allow kids in if it doesn't cause them to incur more costs. But 153 kids is a lot of kids. The junior class is 105 students this year.
Jackie?
Yeah, thinking about the big drivers of cost. And so one is the tuition assessment. And I did see the strategic plan for the schools, and I think there's some really good things in there, you know, increased belonging and academic rigor and capital planning and all of that. But I wonder if it would make sense to have a sort of more express strategy around stopping or being more competitive, stopping the flow. You know, you don't want to restrict choice from families, but what you do want to do is make sure that the schools are really focused on it, almost like a little mini action plan within the strategic plan that looks at that over time. And so I guess it's, you know, maybe the question is, are you aware of that kind of thinking going on at the school?
I think in the past, you know, they've talked about trying to stem that tide of so many kids leaving after 8th grade.
Yeah, it might. I think that would be,
Yeah.
as we see Dr. Marushek come in, would be a good area to explore, is whether there is a more focused kind of like tiger team effort to really, you know, especially with the addition of like a communications person, et cetera. So just thinking about that. And then,
Jackie, I'll ask Dr. Marushek to kind of cover that next week.
all right, thank you. And then the other one being the health insurance. And I thought it was really interesting, the GLP-1 phenomenon. And I guess my thoughts were that right now, the insurance companies seem like they're increasing costs and not covering these expensive drugs. But we know that there's a good return on these drugs in terms of reducing all-cause mortality, medications, et cetera. You know, no fair. Like, they get to raise the rate and not cover, and yet it's going to be the insurance companies that we're going to see the benefit in terms of reduced expenses. So I just wonder, have they discussed that kind of outlook?
Yes, so I'll just be honest. I sit on the Maya Health Benefits Trust board, one of 5 people. I was one of the 5 people that took that vote. Like, we had national consultants in to advise us to look at things. There was a University of Chicago study, apolitical, that said, and this was from, I think, last summer, that the cost for those drugs, even if factoring in the health improvements that people would see down the road, would have to drop by 80% for them to be cost effective. And that's not happened. And I think we've all seen those charts about like what other countries are paying for the same drugs versus what we're paying here. It's pretty shocking, you know, $1,000 a month versus $150 a month. And I know one of the difficult things, they had 2 separate actuarial firms try to estimate the health rates for next year with three options: get rid of GLP-1, keep the GLP-1s, or if we kept the GLP-1s, require people to go through a health program where they had to do once a month weigh-ins, they had to take nutrition things, they had to report back and forth. And except for getting rid of the GLP-1s, there was no certainty that the actuaries could provide on those other 2 options, because now that the pills have just come out within the last 2 months, you know, there was a huge increase in costs just from that. So, I mean, I think there's so much uncertainty nationally. Like,
Yeah.
it's hard, and we're sort of the tail, like, that's getting, or I guess, I don't know,
Yeah.
the chihuahua that's getting wagged by like a
Yeah, and I mean,
bigger tail.
right. And so,
So-
it seems like it's certainly like a pricing problem, but I'm wondering what the incentive for the actuaries are to, you know, underestimate those benefits, because, you know, if you're stopping heart attacks and strokes and diabetes, you're saving a lot of money in the healthcare system. But anyway, it sounds like the group is kind of looking.
It's hard, and yeah, I mean, Blue Cross cut it off statewide. That says a lot. So you would think if there were true savings that they would be realizing and the cost came down for the drugs, they'd start covering them again. So I don't know.
But on health insurance, when you presented tonight, you mentioned, the what if it
Yep.
continues, and you said if we don't address it, we're going to be in trouble. So how do we address it?
I mean nationally. Like,
Okay.
I'll be blunt. Like, we need moderate apolitical people at the national level to say we're in a national crisis. We need to figure out a solution, and it's not going to be Massachusetts or the little town of Sandwich or even New England that's going to solve it. It has to be a national solution. I don't know what that is. Like, people who do that for a living. I mean, I can't think of another thing nationally that is going to hurt every single person and employer in the long run as much as health insurance.
Fair enough.
Ed, if I may.
Go ahead, Bill.
You know, Bud mentioned the move to Maya, that we worked hard on, 2019-20, like that has paid dividends for the town. I hate to think about where we would be sitting tonight if we didn't make that move 5 years ago. It allowed us, in our prior, when we were with the Cape Cod Municipal Healthcare Group, there was only 2 plans available. We had a single plan and a family plan. With Maya, now we have a single plan. We have what they call a 2-party plan, so it could be a mother and child, or husband, wife, whatever the case may be, and a family plan. That move alone, just adding that 2-party plan over the course of these 5-6 years has saved us millions of dollars. I think we are constantly looking at ways to do what we can on health insurance, but Bud is correct. I mean, this is going to take a national change. We're trying to weather the storm. I think GLP-1s have been part of it. Just when you're looking at just like the pure financials of it, the first 6 months of this fiscal year, the town is averaging over $112,000 a month cost on GLP-1s. It's staggering, and that's hitting our budgets directly. So we're taking a look at what we can do to try to manage those costs as best as we can. To Bud's point, it may have to be excess levy reserve. We may have to look at some different things. But thank God we made the move we did when we did 5-6 years ago. But it's just, unfortunately, it's becoming more and more of an issue every year. And again, I think to Bud's ultimate point, is it a blip or is it a trend? I think we're all rooting for a blip. If it's a trend, then we're going to have to deal with it accordingly.
Yeah, and if it is, as you say, a national issue, then it's important people listen this year because there are federal elections,
Yeah.
both congressional and Senate, and people will have to listen in on who's going to respond to what you're describing as something that needs to be addressed in order to help us here locally.
And there's laws in Massachusetts that restrict what towns can do in terms of plan design changes without, we would have to impact bargain it with every union at the same time.
Yep.
There's, the state has identified a benchmark plan that we all have to meet. So far we meet that. So, we'll see how it goes, but.
Anybody else? Jeff?
I wanted to, let me first start with a thank you, and then I got a bunch of questions I'd like to ask. As you know, I'm new to the committee, my first time, and Bud has gone out of his way to help me get up to speed and everything. He's taken time out of his days, and Bill has been forever available on the phone. I've spent a lot of time on the phone with Bill, so I want to thank both of you for your time. It's really helped me get up to speed and answer a lot of my questions. And you've never shied away from any question I've asked, which is very telling as we go forward. At least it's very telling for me as we go forward. So thank you for that. With respect to budgeting, when I think of budgeting, and there's 2 parts to it. A lot of times we think, oh, the annual budget. Well, the annual budget is one piece, but then there's a piece that says, okay, what's in the future? Because a lot of what we're doing today is setting tomorrow's budget. And I think the town does a great job of going through and doing both. You focus on the annual, and then you give us a lot of insight into what you see as a risk, what you see in the future, where the pressure points may be and so forth. So that's great, and I appreciate that. I have a few questions, though, about some things that you don't mention, and either something we can talk about later, you might have the answer tonight, it might be you say, oh, so-and-so's coming in the future and they're gonna talk about that, and that's why it's not here, and that's fine. But as we look into the future and things that might affect the budget, property utilization. You know, it was very much in the news a few years back, you know, when we, going from the historic town hall to over to the bank, gonna free up some properties. We were able to sell some of them, we weren't able to sell others. What's the plan? And that may be something you wanna have in your package, maybe it's in one of the appendix, but, you know, what property do we own? What property are we trying to dissolve ourselves of? What properties don't we think will ever be successful, and what that impact has on the budget?
I would say the biggest properties I can think of, you know, we successfully sold the fire substation in Forestdale. We sold the Jan Sebastian Drive office building. We've gone out to RFP twice on the town hall annex. The most recent one, the select board is still reviewing. That's clearly a tough decision because it's such a prominent building and such a key spot. Yeah, there's tax title sales that we've gotten rid of through the years, and there's a separate state process to get rid of tax title properties that the select board can go through with the oversight of the town treasurer. We did a bunch of those years ago. We look at that all the time to see if there's other ones. Not many new properties have gone into tax title, thankfully, you know, because people have paid their taxes. We have really good returns. I would think the only one left to consider is the annex, with the one exception, if we do build a new downtown substation, then I think you could combine those two lots on 6A where police and fire, the old police station was, where the Veterans Outreach Center is, and the current fire substation. If you could package those together and have sewers that went by, like, that land would probably be worth a lot more than without sewers. And that's one of the things I think we've realized with the annex, that the septic system sort of has restricted the different types of uses. But there's also a lot of discussion about, are there civic uses that we should be looking at there? So the annex is a tough one. But I can't think of any other big, like, physical building properties that we'd have to get rid of. Like, I mean, this is just stating the obvious, and I'm not trying to create, like, I'm not saying we should do this, but hypothetically, the enrollments still go down. Why would you put money into Oak Ridge and Forestdale? Wouldn't you focus the money on one of them and maybe try to do with the one that you're not using, similar to what we did at the Wing School? Like, that might make sense long term, but I think enrollments would have to go down a lot more, and I don't think the current projections bear that out. But, you know, 10 years from now, will people consider it? Like, will Board, Mashpee, and Sandwich have to talk about, you know, should we be working with each other? But also, like, that's a tough hurdle to cross because everyone loves their own local school. And I'm not saying I'm going to get myself in trouble. I'm just saying those are the things we have to think about down the road, depending on what happens with the demographics.
Thank you. Health insurance flexibility. Sounds like you have some flexibility. I don't totally understand it. But we're part of Maya. Maya voted not to cover GLP-1s next year. Therefore, Sandwich doesn't have to cover them.
Right.
Is there other flexibility like that that you can leverage
Yeah.
to help, you know, remove some of this potential cost growth on the health?
There's not a lot. Almost anything that we would do that would have any real savings, we'd have to negotiate with the unions.
But this one you didn't have to, the GLP-1 that's coming off?
Yeah, that doesn't have to be because the larger group decided that we're a member of.
So if the larger group decides that you don't have to, but if it's just the town, you
It's
do.
all,
I'm just trying to understand. I was surprised you had that
Yeah.
flexibility, and I'm
No.
trying to understand, because that's, you know, unfortunately, that's really where the leverage is.
So ultimately, like, GLP-1s are considered a prescription. There's formulary changes every year. that impact prescriptions. Some come on, some come off. And Blue Cross Blue Shield decides that. And then, as we're a member of Blue Cross Blue Shield, and that's our plan, and we go ahead and we follow those formulary changes. So while this is like the big one that's in the news, it's commonplace for probably, I would say, half dozen to a dozen formulary changes every year. So it is part of what Blue Cross Blue Shield does in their prescription review every year.
And there is a benchmark plan that every municipality has to offer certain level of benefits, and that's determined by the state. I'm not putting them on the spot, but Jim might be able to explain this better than me. But like the GIC, the Group Insurance Commission, a lot of Metro West towns, all the state employees have insurance through the GIC. The GIC had to go back to the legislature twice since July 1st in the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars because their costs were exceeding what their revenues were for their plans. So they had to come up with money to make up that difference. And knock on wood, we've never had to do that.
Thanks. The other issues, other items that might be in the future, the big one out there is Sue, and you continue to address it, and that's great. Land acquisition. Any reason for land acquisition can be expensive?
There's
Is any of that in
trying to think of a nice way to say this. There's back when the Cape Cod Land Bank was established, which was a precursor to the Community Preservation Act, the Conservation Commission listed 10 properties as a priority. We've acquired 9 of those. The number 1 we didn't get. They did it again once we exhausted that list. We got those 9, but we didn't get the 1. If the 1 ever became available, that would be something that as a community we should really talk about and think about, either funding possibly through CPA funds or through a debt exclusion. I think it's the type of property that everyone would be able to wrap their head around and would have a lot of overall support. But I don't think we've identified a lot of big parcels. Occasionally, like in Maple Swamp Conservation Area, some parcels come up that will fill in gaps, and we look at those. But we haven't had a land acquisition, I think, in 5 years. And the one on the wastewater was huge, but that was, acquired a different way. I still think, 50 years down the road, that was really wise for the town to do, and for the select board to support, which they did. Even if we don't end up using it for wastewater, there's other things we could use it for, and the WIF could be reimbursed, for example, with CPA funds for affordable housing or something. But that's a long way before we'd say that was surplus land.
And again, I'm just going down a list I got here of things that, as we look out, that could be impactful on future budgets. You indicated next year's budget should, as all what you're seeing right now, could be level funded again. You don't anticipate any large items. The voters rejected the WIF, that increase from 2 to 3. Is that now a cooling off phase? I know when we prevent warrant articles and they don't go through, there's what they call a cooling off phase. We can't present it again for a certain amount of time. On the WIF, is that something that you can go back? We can go back to the voters for that?
We can go back at any point. It would have to, the select board would have to decide to present it to town meeting. There's a Department of Revenue advisory that tells you the number of days that has to be between when town meeting votes it and when the ballot does. And it's longer than, it's like, I don't know, 60 or 90 days. So it's the type of thing you should either vote in the fall at a town meeting and then bring back to the annual ballot, or if you voted it in May, you should include it on like a state election ballot in the fall.
But there's no cooling off period. You could, if there was a feeling that we could go through. You mentioned that because it didn't go through, there's going to have to be a debt exclusion.
We'll have to, to implement things, we'll need almost exclusively debt exclusions.
But is that, move that debt exclusion need in closer now, or?
Yeah, well, I think the hardest part is the engineering and the permitting and then the bidding. So that's all pretty much the same. I think we'd bump up against what we had money to do quicker at the 2% level, and when we went to do the bigger implementation, like putting sewer lines in the ground, if it was any extensive effort, it would have to be a debt exclusion.
But it's because the WIF didn't go through, I think.
Yeah, we could have gone a little bit
Correct.
further by paying for that.
Right. So now,
Yeah.
that's up to how much is gonna have to be in debt
Yep.
on the exclusion. The,
One of my notes on, just let me interject, 'cause it's the same subject. One of my notes was to maybe have Dave, when he comes to present, how much has been collected
Yep.
so far, kind of like here's what we've spent, here's what we still have, here's how we're going to spend it over the next couple of years. And, just give us a kind of a
We could
level
definitely,
playing field, and that might set up some discussion to help everybody consider, should we go back again and ask for
Yeah,
another 3%?
we can do that. That's no problem. And we'll have
Okay.
that ready for March 3rd. One of the things that we decided to have a little policy change on WIF and the funding of WIF. We're going to be asking for a WIF essentially at every town meeting. And the reason for that is that way the funds are always available. So, you have to have those WIF funds appropriated so we can spend them. So what we decided to do was, you theoretically have a May 1st town meeting. We're going to pull what's available. We'll work with Caroline on March 1st, and we're going to just appropriate that March 1st balance that's available. So that way it's always there and ready to go. So as these projects come up, we'll have funds appropriated that town meeting has approved, but we'll go through that with Dave and we'll have those numbers available as well.
the scope of work that I mentioned that I'm looking at, the bill on it is just under $1 million, and it would include doing all the hydrogeologic work that would be needed at the land we purchased to find out like how much volume could you put there in terms of treated effluent, where does it flow, what's the depth of groundwater. Kevin can explain this a lot more, but like there's restrictions on if you dispose of treated effluent and how much it can impact the lens of the public, the water underneath it. Knock on wood, there's no wetlands in that area, which is huge, and it's a really big depth of groundwater, which is why that land was so attractive. Plus, it came with other property because it's in a zone of natural heritage endangered species. It's been marked for endangered habitat. So, like, there's land that we can restrict to allow us to use it, but also it's all outside of zone of contribution, which is huge for public water. So there's a lot of pluses on that. And then, believe it or not, our CWRMP, Comprehensive Water Resources Management Plan, is 8 years old now. So that has to be updated. So that cost includes updating that. And there were some initial engineering work on where pump stations would have to be in the downtown area to pump things up the hill, down 130. So all that is about $1 million. We have the money to do that, but we're going to have to start spending it to get that ready.
Heather, did you have something? Nope, you're good.
Question on the payroll. You mentioned that you do it internally, you got some funds, you studied the process, you're going to make some changes, you're going to acquire some software that's going to improve the process, make it easier, I guess, make it more error-proof in a way, trying to think of a different word. And this came well before my time. Back when you looked at it, did you evaluate trade-off going out of house versus keeping it in-house? And what was predominantly driving keeping it in-house?
So I've been working with the town since 2013. We've been doing payroll in-house since then, and the town has been doing payroll in-house much before then, I believe. I'm not aware of any time that the town privatized payroll prior to that. We did look at privatizing payroll when I first joined the town. At that point, it became cost prohibitive to the town to do. So we bought some new financial software in 2014 and continue to do payroll in-house. We continue to do it today. What our biggest hang-up with payroll is our financial software has not really improved since 2014. We have been told, we've been waiting. Let me take one step back if I may. So our financial software that we have in-house right now, we have an accounting module, we have a payroll module, and a tax collections module. So there's 3 key modules that all have to work in sync together. Our software company has the accounting module ready to go, and when they have the payroll module to go, they cannot get the tax collections module to work. And the reason for that is Massachusetts collects taxes pretty much differently than any state in the country. Most states in the country have county-based taxes. They don't have things like CPA or WIF or things like that. So our software company has struggled. They've been probably kicking the can down the road on us probably for three to 4 years probably. Caroline and I and Ben Steich and Sam Moyer, our treasurer collector, we've been on numerous meetings. We've been waiting. Keep getting told it's ready. Finally, last year, we got frustrated, and we had a different person come on. I was one of the engineers from the payroll company, and we just said to him, like, where are we at? Like, legitimately, where are we at? And he, for all intents and purposes, he came on and basically said, we're nowhere near ready, and it was going to be a while. And one of the things we really want to do when we ever do a software conversion is we never want to be an early adopter. We always want to be essentially one of the last people to go. And so that was our fear, is that, so not only are that not nearly ready, but we don't want to be the first to go. So we knew it was going to be years. And so what we made a decision internally to do was try to look at other options to help improve our payroll processing. So, one of the big, I think things that hurts us internally is our payroll system is outdated. So a lot of times now people can go on to like an employee self-service website. They can download a copy of their W-2. They can download a copy of their last pay stub, excuse me. They can go in and change their taxes. They can go in and change their direct deposit. They can make notifications. They got married, they need to change their health insurance. They got divorced, they need to change their health insurance. All those things, none of our town of Sandwich employees have the ability to do that today. We are woefully behind in that area. The other thing is we have extremely small staffs. I know Bud showed the graph where we have 25 town departments making a very tiny piece of the puzzle. Our accounting office, for instance, we have 3 people in that department. So when we are doing payroll in-house, we have numerous unions across the town, both on the school side and the town side. So every time a union or contract gets negotiated, it becomes our problem to go ahead and try to adapt our payroll system to that negotiated contract. Sometimes it's simple, sometimes it's very difficult. We generally, on the school side, when the school negotiates contracts, we're not given a heads up as to what's being negotiated. So what happens is, and this goes back 10 years, the school negotiated contract, for example, they created a whole entire new pay type that we did not have in our payroll system. And we had to create that in our payroll system. So we're limited by the ability of what we can do. I'll give you a couple examples, sometimes within the federal level. The Affordable Care Act reporting is a nightmare for us. That came out years ago. We've adopted that, and so now we've got that figured out. We've had to adjust to that. The brand new one is on the one big beautiful bill, the new overtime rules. We're working through that right now. Now we have to come up with qualified overtime and unqualified overtime. It's a struggle. We had a meeting about that today, Caroline and I, about how to adapt to that. We sent an email today to town council just asking for a little guidance on that. So those are the things we struggle with when we do payroll in-house. So what we really want to do is get a professional company. This company deals with over 200 different governmental units here in Massachusetts. They're the largest payroll provider in our sector, government, in the state. So they're truly going to be a big help for us. We've started the conversion. We're working on it. We had a meeting with them this morning, just trying to move the process forward. We're hopeful to get there, probably, like Bud said, springtime. Most likely May or June, I think, is where we're going to land. But it's something that we needed to do. I know Bud mentioned it briefly earlier. We have been working with the school, and I have requested personally with the school that the school hire another full-time person in their business office. We've been desperate for it. Right now, the school, which has 2/3 of our employees, has one person dedicated to payroll. One. The school job changes are quite a bit. We probably have I mean, it varies on week, but I would bet on averages, we see anywhere between 10 to 12 different job changes a week from the school. So that every time they're bringing in new employees, it's a lot. The school has one person dedicated to that. So we were desperate asking the school to hire someone just to provide a backup, to allow for that, to allow for better processing. So we're really excited between going out and getting the new system and also the school hiring in this new personnel that will finally be able to move the town forward.
So you're, and you and I have talked about this, but every time I talk with you about it, I get a little bit clearer on it. You're still going to be doing everything internal. You're just bringing on a new system. And this new system, I'll say, sitting here listening to you and previously listening to you, there are a lot of points in there to say why you don't want to do it internally, because things are always changing. And in a company that's focused on payroll, they stay up on that because they got multitudes of customers out there and they have to stay up on it. If you get someone that's large and supporting municipalities and so forth, and so there's a lot of, in your conversation, there are a lot of points that say, gee, why are we keeping house? Because it is very difficult. It can be very complex, and with a small staff, it's very difficult to stay apprised and abreast of it and so forth. But you believe the balance between the software you've selected, unlike the software you had or currently using, and the expertise you have in-house and the amount of staff you have, it'll work for us.
I think we're going to strike the right balance.
Great.
And I think what this payroll company is going to be able to do for us is they're going to be able to do all the Affordable Care Act reporting. They're going to be able to do all the W-2s, the quarterly reporting with the IRS, all those things they'll be able to do for us that take time. I think like a good example is like the Affordable Care Act reporting here in Massachusetts. Everybody gets something from Blue Cross Blue Shield. Well, we're required to produce 1095s that everybody here in Massachusetts doesn't need. The town still spends close to $2,000 a year producing it because we have to by law. We then have to report that up to the federal government. We spend hours on that, hours and hours and hours. So having this company be able to do those things for us is going to be really beneficial. So we feel like between the two, it's really going to strike a good balance for us.
So you are outsourcing some of the stuff.
So we're
You're outsourcing some of the tasks, I'm going to use that term, but still overall management's going to remain in-house.
Absolutely, and we're going to
Balance.
and they'll be able to help us with like onboarding. We have in our payroll and benefits office and the treasurer collector's office, the town has well over 400 active retirees right now. So we're constantly dealing with those people, dealing with those changes. Deaths happen, those sort of things, survivor, spouse, and all those things that we deal with. So we definitely absolutely have to have an internal presence for payroll because it will help us, but having this added feature was really going to allow us to move forward.
Thanks.
Jeff, let me just get a couple other people to ask some questions too,
Okay,
and then
as
come
long as
back
you
to
can
you.
come back to me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Kevin.
I've just got one, and it's not even as much a question as I just want, when Paul comes in with the DPW, last year we gave a rather significant increase in the budget to go towards accelerated road repairs. I'm assuming that is included in this year's budget also. And I just want an accounting, I want to make sure that by the end of June, he's able to spend all that money and how where it's been spent. And that it all goes towards road repairs, not end-of-the-year equipment purchases. Because if for some reason he found out he couldn't do all of it, then we don't need all the money this year either, if it's just physically impossible. Thanks.
Jim.
And yeah, along those lines, last time around, he actually had a sheet of road projects and whatnot. Is there a chance that that could be brought in and updated?
Definitely, yep.
Because I know one of the top roads was Highfield, which is the top of our street, and it still hasn't been done. So I'm curious as to where the money has gone.
He can definitely get that, and I know one of the probably the biggest project we'll do in town, for even bigger than the one in front of the Forestdale School, is Cotuit Quaker Meeting House Road. That's all in the works, but I'll make sure he touches on the big ones and all the other ones, so we'll do that.
Crystal.
Going back to, the school enrollment a little bit, I'm just trying to wrap my head around, like, the constant decrease. And I don't know if this is something that you would know or be a better question for Dr. Maruschek next week. Is there any relation to the enrollment going down with families moving or relocating? Has there been any studies between those two?
I'm not sure. I know just in general, like birth rates on the Cape are way down. And I think the further you go out, the further the drops have been. But I don't think our decrease in enrollment is much different than most of the other public schools. And I know like some of the further out ones like Monomoy, there was a certain percentage Chatham made up in Harwich, and now Chatham's has shrunk even more. And, Harwich is having to pick up a lion's share of the cost, like much more than when they first started.
I can give you a personal example.
Yeah, I'm like, where are they all going? Like,
So my wife, a couple years ago, was the special needs preschool teacher for the town of Chatham, and they did an integrated preschool. She lost her job in Chatham. They wound up moving her to Harwich because Chatham, 2 years prior, had 4 births. 4. So she got moved over because they're Monomoy, so she wound up getting moved to Harwich. So the declining school enrollments, I think, is not unique to Sandwich. I think we're seeing it Cape-wide.
okay. And then just going back here on the primary focus areas, on the town building repairs and improvements, it's not a huge amount, but do you have, I don't think it's this building or any of the assessments that you've done. Do we know what an idea of those?
No, we have a good first draft, but we're fine tuning it. And again, that's all being done in-house. So we're getting reports on each building with pictures and maintenance estimates, things like that. It's fair to say ours will probably be a little bit slower than the schools because they have an outside
Is that
firm
the
doing it.
assessment company? Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
but we're not, I guess in the initial draft, there's nothing that says, oh my goodness, we need a debt exclusion to fund that. It's all normal type upkeep and replacements.
Okay, and we'll have a list of that
Yep.
like in a couple weeks or?
Not a couple weeks.
Or-
I'm not sure I don't even want to put a date on it because these are the same people who are, plowing our street, plowing our roads, fixing the septic systems that break down, doing all the rest. So it's
Okay.
we're paying the price for not farming it out, but the cost is zero.
I haven't looked yet, but have we done anything relative to maintenance costs in the budget? Are they same as last year, increased at all?
If you look at the capital list, there's a couple things are highlighted in terms of, school line went up, and then there's a couple of specific projects that are
Sorry,
some of our
schools went
smaller-
up?
Yeah, and
Okay.
yeah,
In the town, same as last year?
it's up. There's a couple
up.
of individual projects that are specified.
And then the normal
150.
funding, the
yep,
150, that, we left that the same
that's
this
all in
year
there,
as well?
yep.
That went up for the school? Okay.
I just
Go ahead, Heather.
Just would add on capital and the analysis of the existing buildings that our facilities department maintains. First, we have a really wildly competent person with Brian Schlegel. He really knows what he's looking at with all the systems and the building needs. So I feel comfortable that what he's identified as needs are really the needs. But we're not looking at projects that are millions of dollars. If they were $200,000, that would be a big number. Most of them could be funded in that area that falls in the annual capital plan, or maybe a capital exclusion or a short-term borrowing, small things that are not likely to be part of a big debt exclusion. Because we've invested so much in the buildings, he has a really good maintenance plan that he has. He has a strong custodial team, and I'm not trying to put on, but he really does have a good outlook on how to maintain buildings to ensure that they are cared for. And you'll see when we come in on the capital plan, he's looking at making investments in 100 Route 6A on those things that we didn't include in the renovation project that we knew for a while would need to happen, and we're proposing them now. And we know that there are many of those types of things moving forward, but none of them are big numbers. In fact, I've asked for just a total calculation. What's the total number of everything that we see? I don't have it yet, but I'll bet you it will not be a big number.
That's good, thanks.
Nancy?
I I don't even know how to ask this question, but obviously there's been a lot of beach erosion. How is that affecting current and future plans?
Yeah, I'd say the sort of sobering part is we worked, not exaggerating, like 17 years to get that project done, and it seems like a year after it, at least visually, a lot of it's gone. Now it's in the system, that's what we're always told, but the system could be moving it down towards East Sandwich or Barnstable. It's still there. Thank God we did it. I guess the only thing that not a lot gives me hope for erosion, because in the end, Mother Nature always wins everywhere. But like, I think the things that were, I was going to say sea changes, but that's not quite right either. But like, now that the Corps has changed its base permit, that every time they dredge our end of the canal, they're going to pay the extra cost to put it on our beach, and that's going to be their base permit instead of dumping it out at sea without us having to foot the bill. At least that's what they've said. That helps us, but that's only once every 7-8 years. Heather and I were on a Zoom with Congressman Keating's office, and Senator Markey's office was not on the Zoom, but they were getting updated after our call. And so the 111 was funded through what the federal government calls WRDA, Water Resources Development Act. And so the one that our project was done is expiring. They're just getting ready to file for the next 2-year plan. So they asked us what we could do. And so we said, well, any money that you could put in to sort of keep another Section 111 project or something of the like moving forward would be huge. So they let us know about, and I can't even quote accurately what it is, but there's some other type of study that they would try to get us funding for, because once we qualify for that, it's easier to get the money for renourishment projects. So it wouldn't be a 111, but it would be something that the feds would fund. And they did clarify with us, which I'll be honest, I don't think I ever had clear in my head. The last time we got it done, because of the vote that was taken, like our 111 project is permanently identified as a 111 project. Like we don't have to go back and justify it. So that's huge. So that gave us a little bit of hope. But I guess what's sobering for me is like, what if, God forbid the storm that just missed us, what if it didn't? And what if it was 50 miles this way and it was spinning nor'easter winds? What would have happened? Like, yeah, it's depressing.
Back to Jeff.
Thanks. Utilities. You mentioned cost pressures on health insurance, and the other thing, at least you hear a lot about, and I know personally, I'm seeing in my utility bills. How's the town, looking relative to utilities, and what do you think the pressures will be in the future on the budgets?
Yeah, so we're part of the Barnstable County does a county-wide bid for any municipal or school entities that want to participate, and they go out to bid to try to lock in rates for, depending on the returns they get, for a 1, 2, 3-year period. And I believe we just got approved for a 2-year period locking in rates that the consultant for the county said this was a good deal, let's lock it in. So we did. So I don't think we even had to bump our utilities much at all. Those newer buildings that we had added, they're really efficient, but they have a lot of electric systems. That's sort of the counter thing, like everyone talks about, like, oh, green energy, but yeah, it also sucks a lot of energy. So, yeah, I think we're fine for utilities. We didn't even have to adjust that much, if at all. Yeah. Same thing with the fuel costs. County, we take part in a county bid. It locked in our fuel rates for the upcoming fiscal year, a hair less than what was previous. So in the DPW budget, which funds all of our fuel that all the departments get, that did not increase.
Thanks. You talked earlier, someone asked a question about staffing, and you, in particular with the Center for Active Living, and I suspect the recreational would benefit from this too. You do have a program, and I'm not sure what it's called, where residents can work so many hours during the year. I know one of the assignments you can get is over at the Center for Active Living, and you get I'll call it a credit. I don't know if it's a credit. It might be more accurate financial term, but you get a credit towards your real estate tax. How well is that program used, and is that, is it underutilized, I wouldn't say it's over, but is it underutilized? Is it something that could help better if it was better advertised from a staffing point of view, and therefore also offset budget requirements?
So I think right now, I think it depends year. I think we see anywhere from like maybe 10 to 15 people utilize it. Susan Morancic, our COA director, excuse me, she'll send basically like a blanket-wide email out to town departments who can use it. We do have some budget restrictions there because it does hit our overlay. So that's where we use those funds. Like you'll see the overlay here on the budget here under recap items on the other expenses. So the overlay pays for that program. So you are correct. People do receive generally about $750 off their tax bill. So that
Would you say the program's underutilized and there's opportunity for more of it, or is it fully utilized?
I feel like it's in a sweet spot, to be honest with you. I think
10 to 15 is.
I think that's the good number. Yeah, I know. And again, I don't want to speak too well about it. I can't speak too intelligently about the demand that Susan sees, but it seems like she's never looking for more than that number. And I feel like again, there's demand, and then what we can afford to pay as well. But that seems to be a good number right now, that 10 to 15.
And that kind of a question can be one that you can come back with when
Absolutely.
we do the Q&A at the end of the
Absolutely.
budget season.
Yeah, I can touch base with Susan.
It appeared to me to be you talked about difficulty in hiring certain part-time help, and you've got expertise, people that on the Cape that may be willing to provide that expertise, and for it they get a small benefit. I mean, it's not a large benefit, but I think people do it more for giving than they do it for the benefit itself. The benefit is a nice cushion. And I'm just wondering if it's could be better utilized, should be better utilized, I don't know. And would it help with places like the Center for Active Living, where it's noticeable if you got people that are supporting different areas like the gym or classes or the front desk. I don't know the employees in the front desk, if they fall under that and so forth. Question about, there are small items, but every small item adds up and eventually they get big. So when they all total together, question about shellfishing. I'm thinking about where we collect fees and how those fees offset the cost. And I have no idea what the budget's like, but I know we've grown the shellfishing. I participate in it. I buy a license every year. I love it. I'm glad we're doing it. Am I covering the cost of the program when I say I, because I have to get a license and so forth? Because, the only people that benefit from that are those that participate in it. There is some environmental benefit too, but mostly it's people that participate. So I know we've grown that program, and we've got 2 sites this year. Are we covering the costs through the fees?
The fees help offset the costs. It's a Department of Natural Resources that kind of oversees that. We would not come anywhere close to covering the cost of a full-time employee with shellfish revenue.
I would say, what's hard, I couldn't answer intelligently. We'd have to get Jenna Silva, the DNR director, in to explain. As Bill sort of hinted at, I think they call it propagating, but when they put the shellfish down and it's contaminated, then they go down and do stuff periodically, and we'll often see the DNR staff and waiters coming back dripping wet, coming back into the office. We're out moving the shellfish. So I think it's hard to put a value on that time. I mean, we could, I guess, estimate how much it costs, but my guess is the fees we bring in for the licenses don't come close to funding the full cost. It certainly covers the cost to buy the contaminated shellfish that we get, relay it up here, and then, naturally cleans itself out over the year. I know the oysters require a lot more hands-on maintenance than the clams do, but that's about the extent of my knowledge about it. But we could have DNR come in and look at that.
I think that's Jeff, one of the things we did last year was we kind of saved up our questions and that weren't crucial to the budget, like big items, and then compiled those throughout the season, gave them to Bill and team, and they came back at what this year will be the March 17th meeting to respond to those types of
I
questions.
understand, and that's why when I started, I said, if I'll ask the question, if it's gonna be answered later, or you wanna take it
Right.
later, you can.
Yeah, I'm just saying, you may want to, if you've got a list, you may want to consider, which ones are important for tonight, and then which ones could wait till a recap discussion in March.
So, no disrespect. I don't know how to judge which are important or not. And I'm not just here asking questions for myself, I'm asking questions as a member of the Finance Committee. People in the audience that are listening to us tonight may feel that they're important, or may feel they're not important. I don't know. So, but I understand what you're trying to do, and I appreciate that. And it's my first year, so I don't,
No, and that's why I just wanted
what
kind
you
of
see is important.
the
I
lay
may
of the
not
land.
see is important as we go forward. I think I only had one or two more. I was going to ask the question relative to in the package. So this is the pie chart with the percent for the different departments. So I think it's a great chart because I think it is people. I won't say people. I know get a better feel for, as you said, hey, there's only 12% spent here, and that's where we tackle it and really it exists. What would be helpful, and I'm wondering if it's in the package, is as a percentage, how are these changed? Like last year was police 20%, and now this year it's 9. See, so one question, that data I think is in there because you said the historical is in there. But the other question I have is this 2.9%. That's an average. Some of these areas may have grown by 6% and others may have had a negative. So that would be helpful information to have.
So that's in,
It's in there.
it's in tab 5, right, it's right on the front, general government summary, and it does, and like I said, when we move 3 or 4 positions under one department, that makes that department look way up. And then where those positions came from looks way down. But overall, it's a 2.92.
No, I understand, but I was running,
Yeah.
you say it's in there, but I can go look and say, police might have been
Yep.
6%, and then I can find the reasons why it's up 6, and we can
Yep.
look at that balance, and another area might have been down 4% because of some efficiencies that were put in and so forth.
I think it's fair to say, if you look at that section where it says all other town accounts, like, I'm not exaggerating, like, the town clerk's office might have operating budget money of a couple $1,000s. So they have 3 full-time people that make up probably 98% of their budget. Then they have a little bit for office supplies and other expenses. It's really, there's a lot of departments like that don't have a lot of operating money. It's almost all personnel.
Sure. That's it. Thank you.
Anybody else? I would just say, keep in mind the schedule that we have going forward, and if you can anticipate questions ahead of time, it's helpful to the folks that are presenting to us. So, as an example, next week, Dr. Mershek will be here for schools. So if you've got questions relative to the schools, please send them along to myself and Bill, and we'll get them to the school folks so that Dr. Mereshek can be prepared to respond to those, as well as he'll respond when we're in person. Go ahead, Bill.
And again, like any communication anyone on the board needs, we're happy to help with that. Just run that through myself and Ed. It gets a little hectic this time of year because we're meeting on Tuesday and we're posting the agenda on Friday. So it does get a little hectic. So the sooner the better with questions, but we're happy to help in any way we can.
Excellent. Does anybody have any new business or old business? Seeing none, we will come together again next week, as I said, February 10th, 6 o'clock right here. I have asked Dr. Mershek if there's any pre-read documents to please get them to us so that we're prepared for the discussion. So I'll be following up on that. I'll also make sure he's prepared to give us an update on the project regarding the building maintenance assessment that's going on, as well as the transportation study, because those were two things that had come up during prior Finance Committee meetings. So those things will be part of what he'll be discussing as well. But with that, motion to adjourn. Thank you, Jim. Oh, Nancy, did you have something else? Oh, yes, public forum, any public forum. Thank you very much, Nancy. I promised that we'd give the public an opportunity and missed that, but okay. So motion by Jim to adjourn, second by Kevin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous, thank you.